Greetings and welcome to Illinois in Focus Weekend Edition, powered by the Center Square. I'm Greg Bishop, Illinois editor at Franklin News Foundation, publisher of the Center Square Newswire service. This week for Illinois in Focus, the Center Square reporter Jim Talamansi and I will discuss more than 270 bills Governor J.B. Pritzker signed in the span of a week, the status of the state's gun ban and magazine ban in the appeals court, who's looking to replace U.S. Senator Dick Durbin, and inflation impacting education and insurance. All of that and more when we return for more Illinois in Focus, powered by the Center Square.
Teacher Lauren Johnson returned all the graded essays but one. He believed that one student was capable of more.
I don't believe taking the middle of the road is your philosophy. This time, write something you really believe.
The student wrote a new one about excellence. Instead of just grading an essay, Mr. Johnson changed a life. I am that student. I became a writer, and I wrote this to thank him.
Thank a teacher and pass it on from passiton.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop. After the Illinois General Assembly approved more than 430 measures during spring session, few remain acted upon. Last week, Governor J.B. Pritzker acted on 279 bills, vetoing 2 of them. Joining us to review some of that legislation and what could be possible during fall veto session this October is the Center Square Illinois reporter, Jim Talamansi. Jim, let's start with one measure that Pritzker enacted that tort reform groups in Illinois and across the country really put some critical conversation to it.
Yeah, Greg. Well, this was the lawsuit inferno bill, if you will, and I guess it would figure that when you're dumping more than 250 bills on a Friday afternoon, that there would be at least one in there that's a real doozy. And this critics say is certainly it. This opens up Illinois as a jurisdiction for claims alleging injury or illness. The Illinois Trial Lawyers Association, which supported this, well, this is really only exposure to toxic substances, but it's really critics and Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse and other organizations. Well, this is just going to open up our courts with all kinds of cases that don't even involve plaintiffs or defendants in Illinois. Even businesses with any kind of connection running through the state are going to be affected by this. And so it's when this passed the legislature, the American Tort Reform Association labeled Illinois a lawsuit inferno because of this. Quite a few opponents of the bill held out hope that Governor Pritzker would veto it just because it is so anti-business. And also, as some critics pointed out, an anti-judicial system because, again, our courts are going to be clogged up with all kinds of cases that don't even involve plaintiffs or defendants in Illinois. That's what the critics are saying. So, but this was Senate Bill 328. He signed it, and it was sponsored by Illinois Senate President Don Harmon, who received campaign contributions, 5-figure donations from the Illinois Trial Lawyers Association, and so did Illinois House Speaker Chris Welch, received big donations from that group. So it got through with leadership backing and the governor's signature. But that was a real big one, and we'll have to keep an eye on how this affects businesses because actually earlier this week I talked with some people about how this is right away, right off the bat. The measure takes effect now. So businesses that weren't on guard for this, well, they could be exposed. I mean, there may have already been, I suspect trial lawyers had cases lined up to file this week. And there was a group of 16 business groups that signed a joint letter opposing this, ranging from the Illinois Manufacturers Association and the Retail Merchants Association, Hotel and Lodging, Railroad, several trucking groups. I mean, one after another. And an interesting political move by the governor, too, given that, the Teamsters across the country, not so much in Illinois, have in some cases started supporting Republicans over Democrats. That was something they never did. But now you have this Senate Bill 328 that potentially really could hurt the trucking industry in Illinois. So yeah, a lot of potential, ramifications here from that measure, not to mention many of the other more than 250 bills that Governor Pritzker signed.
Well, and it wasn't part of the so-called bill dump. It's kind of what we call it in the newsroom, just because when you get an email on a Friday afternoon at 4:30 and it's 269 bills the governor acts upon, that's not really any other way we can characterize it, but a lot of legislation in there. But a few days before, the governor signed other measures that the small business community was really pushing back against, saying that if the measure goes into effect, it would essentially keep burdensome regulations in place in Illinois if the federal government relaxes some workplace regulations. So obviously the governor taking his signature to a lot of these various bills that business groups opposed throughout the state. But again, Jim, with the huge number of bills that he signed on Friday, there's not much left. Last I checked, there's only 3 bills now left on the governor's desk after the legislature passed more than 435 bills during spring session. What's interesting, though, Jim, is even though it's a Democratic supermajority in both the Senate and the House in Illinois, and Governor Pritzker is a Democrat, we do have some vetoes on the table. I think so far we're looking at like 3 vetoes that have happened over the summer. One of them in particular, I think we're going to keep a close eye on here at the center square, and it involves a Democrat, Illinois Treasurer Michael Frerichs. Tell us a little bit about this bill.
This is really interesting, Greg, because Michael Frerichs, the state treasurer, supported this bill, pushed for this. This is Senate Bill 246, and he actually wrote a letter to the governor last month urging the governor to sign it, and he had backing from all kinds of nonprofit organizations. This bill was going to allow the treasurer to create a nonprofit investment pool and an electronic payment processing program to benefit nonprofit organizations. And they would then be able to deposit funds with the treasurer and then potentially benefit from what the treasurer says are his higher returns. So the governor in his veto message commended the treasurer's work, talked about how much his administration values the work of the treasurer, but then said this could benefit nonprofits that he anyway would characterize as hate groups or extremist groups. And specifically, he called out a group from Indiana, the Indiana Oath Keepers. And he said that they could benefit from this investment pool. And so therefore I'm vetoing this. And he vetoed it in its entirety. And Michael Frerichs then came back with a statement that he provided to us, saying he is going to work with lawmakers to continue trying to push this forward. And now this was a bill that had significant support. Theoretically, could override the veto, although there was actually some Republican opposition to the bill. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the veto session. But my impression from the statement from Michael Frerichs that I got this week was that Frerichs wants to push forward with this, and he said he was very disappointed in what the governor did. So very interesting that, partisan minds don't always think alike.
So we'll be watching that, obviously, and when spring session was in session, we were there on the ground, and we will be there in Springfield for the fall veto session coming up in October. But it's always interesting to track legislation as it goes through the General Assembly, when it gets signed, and sometimes stumbles its way into court and gets into the court process. And that's what we've been tracking with the state's gun ban since it's been in place since January of 2023. Jim, we've got the last court filing in the appeals court from the state, and we're gearing up for oral arguments come September 22nd. So that's just a month away from when we're recording this on Thursday, August 21st. So people can read up more about that particular status of the gun ban at thecentersquare.com. Jim, definitely want to also track other legislation and continued criticism of it. Parents' rights came up this week as Congresswoman Mary Miller is trying to look to secure parents' rights in Congress, and something that could possibly impact a state like Illinois that just allowed for universal mental health checks for school kids. What's the dynamic here?
Yeah, there's been quite a bit of pushback in conservative circles, family groups against this, even though Republicans in the General Assembly voted in favor of the health screenings. This would be universal mental health screenings in public schools in Illinois, starting a year from now with the 2 years from now, but starting not this school year. And so, it would start a year from now. The measure passed by the General Assembly. And this would provide for health screenings across the board, just as you would have vision or hearing screenings. And parents could opt out, but if they don't opt out, they will be screened. Now, some critics, including some State House Republicans, said, well, this could, people could be, could test in a way that the screeners don't see something, flag something, and that could keep them, who knows, someday from getting a college scholarship or a job. And so there was concern. Well, Mary Miller went a step farther, a U.S. Congresswoman. So she has reintroduced federal legislation that would override this and replace the opt-out system with an opt-in system, so that parents would have to opt in to get these mental health screenings. And interesting move by Mary Miller to do this. And an interesting thing, somehow you have, much of the focus has been on this screening and whether this is going to be something that are used to flag kids who may not believe what the authorities believe. But a second part of this, there was another bill that was one of those more than 250 passed that hasn't really been linked to this, but I think should be. House Bill 1365, which the governor signed and takes effect January 1st, 2026, will enable mental health profession applicants to practice while awaiting licensure. So with that bill in effect, and with the universal mental health screening in effect in public schools, you could have unlicensed mental health professionals screening kids in public schools. And the hope would be that the people who've applied to work in the industry would be approved and get their licenses, but some of them could be rejected. And so if you're sending your kid to school and they're getting screened by a quote unquote mental health professional, with House Bill 1365 taking effect, you don't know if that person is a licensed professional or someone who's unlicensed.
There's definitely going to be a lot to track with all of this. Again, they passed more than 430 bills. All but like 3 have been enacted, but we do have some vetoes lurking around that we're going to be watching as well. Again, you can read those stories and more. Go to thecentersquare.com. This is Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop, joined by Jim Talamonte. Jim, last week was the Illinois State Fair. A lot of politics. We talked about it for last week's Illinois in Focus, but going a little bit deeper than just the finger pointing back and forth between party leaders. The parties are going to have to pick who they want to be on the ballot for the November election. You put together 2 different stories here. Let's start with the Democrats and the U.S. Senate race after Illinois U.S. Senator Dick Durbin announced he's not going for another term.
Yeah, and we've talked a little bit about this in the past. You've got 3 heavyweights, really, very well known in political circles, all already in Washington. In that or I should say 2 of the 3 in Washington, the other's lieutenant governor in Springfield. So for the Democratic nomination, you've got Juliana Stratton, lieutenant governor, who has the governor's backing and potentially his huge campaign war chest behind her. U.S. Representative Raja Krishnamurthy, who has been the leader in terms of raising money and has been may have seen a little bit less, say, to the left than some of the other candidates, has really been critical since January 20th of the Trump administration, perhaps more frequently vocally anti-Trump than any of them. Raja Krishnamurthy, he certainly would appear to be a real heavyweight in this race. And you've got longtime U.S. Rep. Robin Kelly, who has a lot of support in the Chicago area, in the Southland, and who has a district, as she has pointed out, which covers urban, suburban, and rural areas, unlike the other 2. So that puts her in a unique place as a candidate. But it was interesting that in some of their speeches on Democrats' Day at the State Fair, they got into economic issues, which seemed a little bit unusual after the economy was a pretty big deal that didn't in last fall's November elections that really didn't seem to be a favorable issue for Democrats. But going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But this is, like I say, this is going to be a knockdown, drag out battle, and way too early to start worrying about polling and that kind of thing. But all three of those candidates are real well-known political names on the Democratic side. And whoever comes out of that will likely be a big favorite in the general election.
Yeah, and I asked Robin Kelly at the state fair with a gaggle of reporters, and she addressed the question of going into a primary, are you going to lean left? Right. I mean, primary elections always tend to have the candidates kind of go to the extremes of either side of the political aisle, just because it's a primary and you want to get those party faithful out to the polls to select you to be their party's nomination. But she said that she's just going to do Robin Kelly, she says. And I think that's something that a lot of the candidates are going to have to balance is, do they lurch further into the direction of their party, to the more extreme? And then it gets a little bit softer if they were to get the nomination and head towards the November election. But either way, it's going to be fascinating to see how that continues to play out, because we've still got a lot of time between now and March when the primary takes place. But it's not just Democrats where people may have some choice. Again, all of this not 100% set in stone yet. They still have to file their nominating petition signatures in late October. But you've got the Republican field taking shape as well. It was interesting, Jim, on Governor's Day, there was some Republican news with Don Tracy, the former Illinois GOP chairman, announcing that he's running for U.S. Senate.
Yeah, and Greg, you talked with former GOP Chair Tracy. He's easily, by joining the race, the most recognizable name in the Republican field. But unlike, I think, many of the other candidates on both sides of the aisle, he may not run far to the right. At least he didn't signal that he would in his conversation with you. He talked about the economy being the standout issue. He said Midwestern values are important, but he also said he is someone who believes in a big tent, that he believed that as party chairman, and he believes it as a U.S. Senate candidate. Now, some of the other candidates are just the opposite. So will any of the more farther right conservatives be able to emerge? None of them so far have a whole lot of name recognition. I talked with Jimmy Lee Tillman, founder of the Martin Luther King Republicans. He is a Trumper all the way, and he took some shots at Don Tracy for being a deep state never Trumper. That's what Tillman said. Pamela Denise Long appears to have some conservative backing in the Chicago area. Conservative candidate Casey Klebeck has run before, and Carrie Caparelli has run for some local seats in Chicago. But will any of these candidates have the finances, the political structure, organization to challenge Don Tracy, who right now would appear to be the leading candidate? But there's still time someone else could emerge.
You know, money is always a factor in elections, but one thing that I think you touched on there is pretty crucial, and that is infrastructure, right? The ability to get the party and the networking and activating people across the state. Obviously, that's something Democrats have done successfully in Illinois. Put the gerrymandered map aside, they definitely are able to have the network and the county chairs associations very active in Illinois for the Democrats. But the Illinois Republican Party, especially Don Tracy, coming from that leadership team, he may be able to tap into that and in a way get that network fired up for the general election. Obviously, parties stay out of primaries largely, so Tracy's going to have to fend off any contenders in the Republican primary. But after that, it's going to be important to watch how these two parties ultimately use their mechanics to get their message out. All of this, Jim, while you also have the possibility we could have some non-established party members trying to vie for the U.S. Senate seat. Independents, Libertarians, Green Party. There's likely going to be some nonpartisan or some rather non-established parties jumping into the race, but they don't have to file until sometime in the spring of next year to get on the November ballot. So we'll be watching all of that with elections. Obviously, stay up to date with the latest at thecentersquare.com. This is Illinois in Focus Daily, the weekend edition. I'm Greg Bishop, joined by Jim Talamonte. Jim, a couple other stories about the economy, right? I mean, we've been dealing with energy prices going up, seeing it hit, consumers, both residential and businesses, 20, 30, 40, 50% increases. And it's not just the only place where we're seeing increases on the consumer price. The taxpayer cost increasing across the board for a lot of things as well. Let's just touch briefly here on public budgets ballooning while we're seeing across the state, especially in like Chicago, over several years, despite getting hundreds of millions of dollars more, we're seeing student enrollment decline.
Yeah, public schools, boy, you have to, if you really take a look at the numbers, you have to wonder, anyone who pays taxes in the state of Illinois is paying for education, and what are you getting in return? Illinois' education budget, and this is numbers and the analysis coming from the Illinois Policy Institute, spending has increased by nearly $4 billion over the last 10 years. The number of students enrolled in public schools statewide down by 177,000. So you're talking about huge increases in the spending per student. What are we getting in return for that huge additional investment? Well, we're getting, for one thing, poor academic proficiency, in particular in math. Achievement has declined significantly. The other big part of that, and perhaps part of the reason for the academic decline, is chronic absenteeism. In the state of Illinois, the chronic absenteeism rate for public school students is 26.3%. I talked with a Catholic high school principal in Chicago's Auburn Gresham neighborhood, economically challenged neighborhood and school to say the least. Their attendance rate was 96% last school year. But the state's public school students, not even getting to 75% in terms of attendance. Their chronic absenteeism rate, 26.3%, far higher in Chicago. You mentioned the mess that is Chicago public schools. It's a 40% chronic absenteeism rate, and the chronic absenteeism rate for CPS teachers was around 40%. So that's part of what's driving the academic deficiencies in the state of Illinois. And on top of that, I talked with Hannah Schmidt of the Illinois Policy Institute. She said, now, what is Illinois doing to try to improve academic proficiency? Lowering the benchmarks for proficiency. So the new performance levels, according to Tony Sanders, State Superintendent of Education, will bring much needed alignment between grade levels, subjects, and actual college and career readiness. Hannah Schmidt said, well, the lowering of standards will actually just inflate the percentage of students meeting proficiency standards. So we're likely going to see, she says, in the upcoming October report card, improved numbers. And we're going to hear all the state education officials talk about how much better students are doing in Illinois schools and how these investments are paying off. But it's only going to be because the benchmarks have been lowered. And what could then happen, Hannah Schmidt said, is that you could see students who are struggling to meet proficiency in core subjects no longer categorized as struggling, and therefore not getting the extra help they might need in these core subjects. So again, it could actually do more long-term damage, this lowering of standards, just for the sake of getting improved numbers according to the state's new proficiency standards.
Then those standards might just give a rosier picture than we had seen in the past, especially heading into a gubernatorial election, Jim, where the governor has regularly touted that Illinois' education numbers are improving. But if you look at the trends over time, as you said, we've got an increased budgets, taxpayers spending on education going up substantially. But enrollment, proficiency, those things just not necessarily keeping up with what you would think would be increased spending. Some other things, and we've just got a minute and a half here, Jim. Obviously, the government seems to be costing more in Illinois, but it's not just governments. It's also keeping the lights on. It's also making sure your home and your vehicle are insured. And we've had a couple of conversations about that this week. It's definitely going to be something we'll continue to watch at thecentersquare.com. Thanks for joining us today, Jim. Listeners can keep up with this and many other stories at thecentersquare.com.